People who have tried to meet someone from the internet in real life, what happened? We had been planning to meet after knowing each other for years online, just a couple of crazy old guys who loved cars, beers, and weird crap. I had a business trip that was going to take me out near to where he lived. He lived in northern NH, and I had a trip to Montreal. But my business trip got delayed and delayed again, and between those cancellations, his cancer, which he had defeated once, came back with a vengeance. When I contacted him about my updated schedule to come out in what was then 6 weeks from the call, he said his doc said he had weeks to live. I told him I didn't care what it meant, I was going to stick with the plan. So I reserved a rental car in the hope he'd still be kicking. I stayed in touch regularly, he moved to a hospice, and I let him know that I'd cared for my grandmother through months of hospice, 24/6, as she passed away of cancer, so I'd been there and seen it. I was not scared of hospice and would be honored to see him regardless of where he was. When the weekend came, my flight got delayed. There was a forecast of frozen mix between Montreal and the border, but I drove it anyway. I landed in Montreal, paid out of pocket for my rental car, dropped my bags at the hotel downtown, and drove to NH. I got to the hospice around 9 p.m. and talked to him and his wife for hours. I brought him some Timbits at his request. It was the only thing he asked for. Eventually, around 2:30 a.m., I realized that I needed to head back because I had to be at work, teaching a class at 9 a.m. back in Canada, so I slowly said my goodbyes, took a picture with him, and drove back. I called my son to keep me awake, and when I got to the border back to Canada, I told the guards that I had some carrots in my bag that had come from the US via plane, to Canada, to NH, and now back to Canada. That was the only thing I had to declare. My son stayed with me on the phone until I got back to my hotel, where I took a power nap and then taught my class that day. Guard Duck, my friend's online nickname, passed on last Thanksgiving, which was just a couple of weeks after I visited. But he held on and fought and faced it through it all. He never flinched or looked away. He was thankful for the extra time he had with his wife and getting to see friends. He and his wife were among the greatest people I've ever met. Speaking of, I got a Christmas card from her a couple of days ago. I'm in the process of putting together a care package for her. She's doing well as could be. I guess this is just to say, imaginary internet friends are sometimes the best friends you'll ever make. And I regret nothing. R.I.P. Guard Duck. Story 2. I met one of my best friends in an AOL chat room 18 years ago. I chatted with her nightly for about a year. Lost contact for 2 and then bumped into her in real life and have been friends ever since. We were also recently roommates for a year and a half. She's basically a sister to me. Story 3. I kind of have 2 examples here. Met a guy online through a pen pal website. I love writing letters. I live in Australia and he lives in California. We decided to try a long-distance relationship, and after 6 months, he came to stay with me for 3 weeks. I never left and we've been together nearly 9 years, married for 2. During the wedding planning process, I was an avid gamer. I met someone to play games with that was good to teach me to play better since I wasn't very good. Got talking and found out that the guy and his wife were wedding photographers, and we just hours canceled because he double booked himself. He flew down and did our wedding photography for us. All in all, I had pretty good experiences, I would say. Story 4. Met a girl in a Harry Potter forum when I was 15 years old. I'm from Canada and she's from France. When I turned 17, I flew to France to spend 3 weeks at her place, and she then flew back to Canada with me for 3 weeks. 10 years later, we are still really good friends. Met again in Ireland 2 years ago. Story 5. Back in 2008, my 3 Call of Duty buddies from a few states away and I would play every day after school, after randomly adding each other. They all 3 knew each other in real life. Friend number 1's dad passed away suddenly, and I sent him and his mom a sympathy card. They were both really moved by the gesture, and I was invited there over the summer. As of today, number 1 and I have met up 3 times, and number 2 and number 3 4 times. We continue to game and text at least once or twice a week, now that we've all grown up. I consider them closer friends than a lot of the people I'm friends with here at home. Story 6. Probably not what you're looking for, but this was kind of wild. I posted in a thread looking for vocalists in my area to sing on some songs I've been working on. Someone responded to look up someone via Instagram. I looked her up and she's good. Really good. Turns out she's been recording at a studio just down the street from my house. I let a little while pass without messaging her because I wasn't quite ready to send anything out yet. Got to my band's show last weekend at this dive bar on the other side of town. Got off the stage and she's in the crowd and actually approached us and complimented us. Took me a minute before I made the connection. Sent her the songs yesterday and she liked them. Story 7. I met one of my best friends over Instagram and I was 12-ish. We both had pretty popular photography type pages and we started talking through DM. Many FaceTime calls and conversations later, we met in person with our moms when we were 14. The next year, flew out to California to stay with her family and go to Disneyland with them. Then the next year, flew out to their home and spent over 2 weeks with them. Story 8. Does Craigslist count? Because I got a lot of roommates off Craigslist over the years. Became very good friends with a few of them. One of them had this ex-boyfriend she wouldn't stop complaining about, all day, every day. Her stories about him were so outlandish and she was so embittered. It made me insanely curious about what his side of the story was, given that I lived with her and knew that she could be a handful. I wound up meeting him randomly a few years later, not online, and paid extra close attention because I knew who he was from all of her endless complaining. I was like, he's really cute and he seems smart and funny and not at all like a human garbage monster. And then we fell in love and had a baby. Blah, blah, blah. I sometimes wonder if it would have happened if I'd never met this random bitter ex-girlfriend after posting a roommate ad on Craigslist. I probably wouldn't have paid nearly as much attention to him if I hadn't been hearing terrible stories about him for literally years. For what it's worth, we're still together, and I really must attribute her stories to the fact that everyone is a less than ideal partner when they're like 17 years old. Story 9. Guy that I had exchanged messages with from OkCupid found me on Facebook. I was a bit weirded out, but accepted his friend request and noticed his last name didn't match with all of his other family members. Not a common last name. I googled his name and nothing came up. Then I googled his first name with the last name that most of his family members had, and boom. A registered offender had been out for less than a year after serving 12 years. I told him what I found. Said thanks, but no thanks. I deleted OkCupid and never went on a dating site again. Story 10. I met a girl from Tumblr at a meetup I organized. This was back in 2010 when Tumblr wasn't quite so crazy. We got married a couple years later and have a kid together, with one more on the way. Explaining how we met now is awkward since Tumblr became the cesspool that it is today. Story 11. I joined a couple of small gaming forums in 2002. I befriended lots of people on each and found myself waiting to meet everyone. Some people thought the idea creepy, but it was purely out of friendship on my side. So in 2008, I saved up about $1,500 and went on a 3-week, 8,000-mile road trip to meet anyone who was interested in having me visit them. I met over 20 people on that trip. Every visit was awesome in its own way. It is a lot cheaper than you might think it is if you're willing to sleep in your car or if people you visit let you stay the night. One of the women I met on that trip married me 6 years later. Been together ever since. I've also had one friend from that group live with me for a couple years before the road trip, actually. And I've met several others under other circumstances. Meet people from the internet. It's great. Trust me. I can literally say it changed my life and for the better. Story 12. Basically, all my friends are from online gaming, all over the world, and we've met with few exceptions. One in particular stands out. Was being flamed in an MMO battleground. This one other player supported me and backed me up against the crowd. Twice in a row. Made me curious, so I PM'd them after the second game and they were actually on the same server as me. First, I thought they were being a bit overly weird, then I thought they were also gay until I figured out it was a girl I was talking to. That explained their way of writing and what they were writing, which threw me off since I'd been assuming I'm talking to a male. 3 months later, we met in her country. Now we've been a couple for over 3 years, engaged for one and traveling the planet together. Also, gay? What do you mean? Story 13. A guy who lived 2 states away friend requested me on MySpace. We never really chatted or connected. Fast forward 12 or so years and I'm in the state this guy lives in at a wine bar enjoying an acoustic set. The musician looks super familiar. It's the guy from MySpace. It's a small bar and so he casually says between songs, "You look very familiar. Have we met?" And before thinking, I blurt out, "Sort of. It was a long time ago, but it's not the type of story you'd want me to tell in front of everyone at the bar." Immediately, he turned beet red, the bar went quiet, and everyone was staring and looking at him, and I realized immediately after I said it what my comment must have sounded like. Story 14. I was best friends or soulmates with a girl I met on the internet when I was 10. We were so close, we wrote long letters to each other every day, dreamed of the day we would be united in real life, and we even believed we were telepathic and could send one another mental messages long distance. She was the closest friend I ever had for probably at least 5 years. We stopped talking for a few years, but stayed distant friends. One day out of the blue, she says she's headed my way and wants to meet up. She ended up crashing on the couch for about a week. I was super nervous to meet her. I thought she changed a lot and we wouldn't relate anymore, especially since we hadn't been talking as often. When I met her in person, it was like we'd never been apart. We'd known each other in person the whole time. We'd never webcammed and barely even exchanged photos, but she was so familiar to me. Still the best friend I've ever had, and I'm grateful to have rekindled a relationship in that way. Story 15. Well, we've been dating for almost 4 years, so it's been going pretty well. One day we'll get married, but we have next to no money because she's a broke college student and I'm a broke manager, supporting her, so we're waiting on it. We're raising 2 cats together, too. Our future children are amazing, and I'm so proud of how much sleep they accomplish. Story 16. I fell for a girl once. Met in a chat room and talked just about every day for 2 years. Long distance with her in the US and me in Australia. One day, she basically just disappeared without a word, and feeling impulsive, I thought I'd fly over to visit her. would be just like a movie, making a grand romantic gesture and everything working out perfectly. So I flew all the way to a small town called Udua, TN, booked the closest hotel to her house, which was an almost 10-mile walk to her house. So I walked all the way and knocked on the door, hearing footsteps rushing through the door, my heart racing. Opened the door and it's a 13-year-old African-American boy. Knocked on every door in that street, hoping I just made a mistake, but no dice. One of the lowest points of my life was walking back to the hotel and spending the rest of the week alone on the opposite side of the world. What'd you think was going to happen? Story 17. Forgot what instigated it, but when I was like 16 or so, I got talking with some older, late 20s dude on MySpace. I lived nearby, so we decided to meet up and chill. Turns out he lived in a penthouse type thing and came from a super rich family, so basically his whole life was working out, buying nice crap, and partying. He was also insanely good looking. He pre-gamed a bit. He invited a bunch of people, mainly women, over. I'm talking like a 10-to-1 girl-to-guy ratio. And we partied. Ended up getting some with a young woman that night. Chilled with him on and off for a year or so, and pretty much every night went like that. Not always getting some, but I mean, a hell of a lot more often than I ever have since. Ended up cutting ties because surprisingly, being an attractive jock playboy living on daddy's checkbook can make people kinda schmucky. Who would have guessed? Story 18. I've met 2 people from Reddit in real life. Not counting the mod or admin meetup in 2017 I went to. The first messaged me and we went to chatting and she said she was coming to Chicago for the Blues Festival. I offered her a place to stay if she needed one and she agreed. I was innocent at first, but we ended up hooking up for that week and then she went back to Canada. This was like 5 years ago and she and I are still good friends and talk all the time. The second messaged me too, saying she really connected with the comment I made about first seeing the ocean because she just gone through a similar experience. She was going to come down to Chicago to visit a friend of hers and ask for suggestions of things to do. I gave her a bunch, and then we kept talking and finding out we had more and more in common. We eventually started talking over the phone and text messages, and when she came down, we went to Kuma's for burgers and beer. We kept talking, and I was really starting to like her. She said she wanted to come down to Chicago again, and if she could stay with me. I told her of course. And a few weeks later, she was here for Saturday and Sunday. Really, it was mostly Sunday because she got in late on Saturday and fell asleep on my couch. The next day, we went to the zoo and had a really amazing day. After that, we came back to my place and decided to go to the brewery nearby, which made a beer that had her name in it. We went there and then ended up bar hopping through until we ended up near the dive bar by my apartment. We drank and played pool there and eventually grabbed some to-go beers and headed back. I asked if she wanted to see the place by the river I like to go and drink and think. We sat and eventually started making out and decided to head back to my apartment. We slept together and then the next day went to the south side to get breakfast at a place she really liked near her friend's apartment before she had to drive back. We kept talking after that, and I was planning on coming up to visit her in Detroit, but then one day she just ghosted me out of nowhere. I don't know why she did, but I was really bummed because I like this girl a lot. Long distance is a deal breaker for most. Story 19. I met this Singaporean girl online more than 10 years ago. I used to make fairly popular Flash animations, and she was a fan. We got together since we were both somewhat loners. We chatted and video called almost every day for a couple of years. Later, she found someone else, and then I did too. After I broke up a few years ago, the Singaporean girl started chatting with me again. It turned out she had also broken up around the same time, so we started the long-distance relationship thing all over again. Since we were now adults and had my own place, we seriously started to entertain the idea of her visiting me. She did visit, paying for the ticket herself and planned on staying in my apartment for 1 month. I was stressed out and imagined all the things that could go wrong. Things went great, better than I could have ever hoped. We spent every day watching YouTube, being affectionate, and playing video games together. If there ever was a person I'd love to spend the rest of my life with, it's her. The best part is, the feeling is mutual. Since then, she has visited me a second time, but at the moment, there are no plans for her to stay here permanently. Kind of hurts that I only get to see her about once a year, but at least I have something to look forward to. Sorry, it's not a story with a big twist. It is what it is. Story 20. Wait, have we come back around where it's weird again? I met my first real girlfriend on Hot or Not like 15 years ago. I met my second girlfriend on World of Warcraft. I met my third on March, fourth on eHarmony, and fifth on Tinder. I'm now married to the Tinder girl and we have a kid. There's also an unknown number of women I met on all said sites prior to this marriage. I feel like other than my family and the handful of friends I have from school, every single person I know is somehow from the internet. Well, looks like somebody needs to touch grass. Story 21. I was traveling in America and arranged to meet a couple of people from a chat board I used to post on. A girl and a guy who were friends in that town. Didn't know much about them, but I did know the girl was a club dancer and I was a little bit excited about that. They turned up at the bar and the girl was a beast with a visible mustache. Genuine club dancer though. The guy was a dwarf. They were both lovely people and we had a great time, and obviously there was absolutely nothing wrong about either of those things, but I was a little bit taken aback and kind of, oh, internet, at first. Just to really clarify, there is obviously nothing wrong about being a little person. It just very much took me by surprise at first. I feel bad writing this down, but it was just surprising when you don't expect it. No, I get you. Story 22. This pertains to two different friends. We played World of Warcraft for something like 7 years. It always joked and mentioned about actually hanging out, but we were both middle schoolers when we started playing WoW. Fast forward to 2016, both of us are grown-ups with jobs and still in constant contact through video games and social media. We finally went forward with a plan for me to fly from Minnesota, where I live, out to New York, where he lived. Spent a week out there and had some of the most fun of my life. I returned in 2017 for a 2-week stay, planning on going back again this spring. He's even tried to get me to move out there with him. The second friend was the guy that introduced me to my first friend. I never chalked him up as the type that would open his door to strangers from the internet. He was our guild leader in WoW and was quite a bit older than all of us, like 10 years. So for most of the time knowing him, it wasn't really something I considered until 2018, where I'm in my mid-20s and hanging out with people in their 30s isn't weird at all. I rented a car and drove down and met up with him after nearly 10 years of gaming together and spent an enjoyable week hanging out and playing video games together. I strongly suggest if you trust your internet or gaming friends enough to go visit them, it's something I haven't for a second regretted and has become a yearly tradition for me. If you're not a loner and actually have friends, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. Story 23. I messaged a friend of a friend on MySpace around 2008. We became good online friends as she was in Europe backpacking at the time and staying with her family in England in the interim. She was going to be coming back to the States. I'd grown up there to find a job and she asked if she could crash at my place. Of course I said yes. Upon meeting in person the first time, all of our feelings held via online chats and messages materialized. The attraction was instant, but the timing was all wrong and she's just gone out of a long-term relationship. We were good friends still, but had a falling out. My fault, nothing weird, just being a dumb young guy who thought he was hot crap. Lost touch for a little while. 2010. Sometime in 2011, I get a text saying she's coming through town with her friend, girl, after having completed a hitchhiking race and needs a place to crash. We had texted every now and again to check in and to let the other know we missed each other. So of course I said yes. Duh. We met up, ate Mexican food, had some drinks, and had a great time reconnecting in real life. The next day, the girls, in the spirit of the aforementioned hitchhiking race, despite it being over, wanted to hitch from my place, Nashville, to a little town in Texas. They asked to be dropped off along the highway, I-40 West, and I offered to take them 50 miles as a small head start. Of course, it starts raining. Around the 50-mile mark, I offered to take them 100 miles. It's 750 miles door-to-door for them, as I'm feeling bad about picturing them with their thumbs out on the highway in crappy weather. These girls can handle themselves, but even still. And the three of us in their gear are crammed into my little GMC Sonoma, so this is definitely not a long road trip kind of vehicle. 15 hours later, we arrive at their destination, Texas. 3 days later, I leave Texas. She and I both having enjoyed the time immensely, but with our minds a tad confused as to where things go from here. We stay in touch as much as we can, but our lives are indeed busy. In spring 2012, after much discussion, I left everything and moved to Texas to pursue job opportunities and take her on a date. In winter 2014, we moved in together. In late fall 2015, we got engaged. In late summer 2016, we were married. We're now living and working in England and continuing to love life with each other. So yeah, internet friends for the win. Story 24. I broke down and tried out Tinder and ended up securing a date. The girl was 45 minutes away and wanted to see Justice League on release weekends since she was into comics like I am, and she wanted to meet at a local comic shop before we went to the theater. I met her there and she ended up dressing in pajamas and also brought her sister. Afterwards, they immediately said they were going to Taco Bell and for me to follow them, to which they took a bunch of weird turns and speeds that I couldn't follow and I lost them. I went back to the comic book store and tried to text her, but she ended up buying a burner phone to talk to me and never responded to anything for 4 months. I ended up watching the movie at a $4 movie theater. At least the popcorn was good. Story 25. I went on Plenty of Fish years ago. I set up my profile and must have accidentally allowed comments on photos. Well, a lot of guys message you on those sites, and a lot of them don't react well to a no thank you when asked to meet. So I went out to dinner with a guy, and he asked me to come in for a bit when we got back. Immediately came over while we were still standing and was all over me, hugging and trying to kiss me. I pulled my face back and pushed him back, like, what are you doing? And then told me that people had written a bunch of nasty comments under my picture on the profile, but for some reason I didn't see them or know about this. So basically a bunch of random strangers made up stuff which almost got me essayed. And this happened on a couple of dates. This was just the first guy to explain why he was behaving like that. I left the other dates as well, so I asked the guy if he reported it. He said no. I told him I couldn't believe he didn't report it and I was leaving. I went home and went into the profile settings. I figured out how to turn off the enable comments feature. I did not look for or read the comments, as I do not want to be thinking about whatever awful things they said. In hindsight, I probably should have printed them out and given them to the police so they don't do this to another woman. Story 26. I have several old friends whom I first met online. I'm in my mid-30s now. I met one of them when we were both 16. We were regulars on the same message boards back when they were a thing. Became friends, kept talking and emailing for years, and he's come to visit a few times. He lives in the Midwest. I'm in New York City, so it's rare, but still fun. Another friend I met on LiveJournal many years ago, and the same thing happened. Again, we live far apart, but see each other once every couple years. Story 27. I used to play a healer in World of Warcraft. It was pretty common to make friends with tanks or meteor players for group-up quests or dungeons or raids. My first character I made for that game was male and female, as I decided I'd rather just play and not be bothered because I was a girl. In 2005, I met a tank player online and we started grouping up quite a bit. We both could reliably play our classes. This tank player was playing a female character. We were friends for a while, and it finally came out that I was female while everyone had just assumed I was male and that he was male when people assumed he was female. Anyway, that player is now my husband. We met in person in 2006. We've been married since 2010 and have a toddler. I would have definitely been comfortable meeting some of my other online gaming friends too. I felt closer to some of them than people I knew in person. Story 28. Finally, a question I have a good answer to. I made a pen pal in Korea in 2007 who I stayed up chatting all night with for over several years. In late 2012, my father organized a holiday to the Philippines for him, my brother, and myself. I told my friend in Korea about it, and they said, "Why don't you come to Korea?" I figured, why not, and asked my dad. To my surprise, he said yes, and so it was decided. We added Korea into our plans, and that Christmas, I met my pen pal of over 5 years. We headed off straight away and met up several times over the next few days. I fell head over heels for them, and on an impulse, invited them with us for the holiday to the Philippines. After much convincing, they decided they would come. We spent New Year's drinking at a street party in Manila, and that's when I asked her to be my girlfriend. She said yes. The rest is history. We got married in December of 2014 and have our first baby on the way. Story 29. This will probably get buried, but I actually have a good one here. We met on IMVU. I don't know if anyone has been on that website lately, but it used to be a lot different. Anyway, it's a virtual chat room that would match you with random people online. Night Owl and I met one day and didn't stop talking. I mean, we literally talked every day for years. We would chat online, talk on the phone, the landline once we got free long distance, and write letters to each other. He's from Michigan and I'm from Indiana. We met about 13 or 14 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when. For my 15th birthday, he convinced his parents to head down to Indiana to meet me and my family. We both basically said, "Glad you're not a criminal." Lol. After a couple of years and adulthood getting in the way, we reconnected when I told him he should come celebrate my 21st birthday with me. When he came to visit, I suggested he move in with me. What could be better than my BFF living with me? I'll tell ya, that first kiss. Once things started towards a relationship, I don't think either of us were really ready for it, moved fast. They're still so happy together 4 years later. We just got married back in October. It was beautiful. He was so fancy in his top hat. And he's still my bestest best friend and my favorite human. Oh my gosh. Memories. IMVU? Story 30. Sure, lots of times. Not through any dating app type deal. Haven't gone that route, but I met up with lots of people through various hobby-focused forums, back when forums were more of a thing. I belong to a number of small little online communities for motorcycles, mountain bikes, photography, music, and so on. They were small enough that you knew most of the active members by name and were well enough moderated that everyone would act like a grown-up or get kicked out. Given that you had some idea who you were talking to after a while, meeting up really didn't seem like a big deal even in the days before it was a cardinal sin to reveal your actual identity online. I met up with individuals in groups many times to ride dirt bikes or catch their band play or see their photo exhibit at a gallery. I still hang with some of those folks. Obviously, not every personality meshed perfectly in the real world, but they all had a common interest and some history of getting along in the virtual world, so it was all pretty chill. I'm sure there are lots still out there, but these small forums I was part of sort of fizzled out as Facebook and Reddit type stuff became the big thing. I have met up with several people from here as well, mostly from the cycling subreddits. I recently spent a day showing someone who was visiting my area around the local mountain bike trails, and we had a great time. It's all been cool though, but I am a bit more apprehensive about it, as with such a large user base, I don't really know who anyone is on here. Now that I think about it, I did set up a date online once. She brought her brother along and really didn't say anything the whole time. Kind of weird, but I understand being nervous. However, the brother and I got along great and became friends. Never went on a second date with a girl though. Story 31. First time when I was a kid. Met a guy at a shopping center and traded floppy disks. Early internet era when it would have taken forever to upload or download a whole 1.44 megabytes. Most important was just after college, I moved in, we got engaged and got married and have been happy ever since. About a decade and a half. Another was a friend who let me crash at his place for a few days while I was traveling and he showed me around the city. Another turned out to live in the next town over. We got to be really good friends for a while and would hang out a lot, but gradually drifted apart after a few years. And there are some coworkers that I normally only ever see online. Occasionally, we meet up at the same city and party. Long, intoxicated nights, wandering around strange cities trying to find our hotel rooms. Finally settling in about dawn only to have to wake up and work again or travel back home in a couple hours. Story 32. I had a woman in my town message me asking if I was the guy who sold her a bed. She found me through her boss of the restaurant she worked at. It wasn't me that sold her the bed, but she still seemed keen to want to chat afterward. We became really good friends in a really short period of time to the point where we fell for each other. But she already had a boyfriend and didn't want to leave him for someone she'd met online, much like her ex did to her. Either way, we carried on chatting until she said things were getting more serious with the guy. They were looking at getting a house and she was possibly pregnant. Deleted and blocked me the following day. Then deleted her Facebook. Saw her about a year later, pushing a pram, and again after that about another 3 months later. Both times I made sure she saw me. She nearly burst into tears both times. Story 33. Met dudes to go fishing twice. First time was ocean fishing off the coast of Oregon. Showed up at the boat launch at 0600. Helped launch his boat and hopped in. Battery was out. So he pulled the battery out of his truck and packed it down to the boat. Also out. So I pulled the battery out of my truck and we were off. Caught a limit of bottom fish, cleaned him, then jumped his truck. Next time, I met a different dude to fish the Willamette River in Portland for sturgeon. Launched the boat and got a mile downriver and the motor crapped out. He couldn't get it started, so engaged his kicker motor to get back upstream to the boat launch. The motor wasn't strong enough to fight the current. I told him to position the boat behind a big rock to be protected from the current and anchor up. I opened up the main motor and got her started, but it wasn't running great. Good enough to make it back to the launch, though. 10 out of 10 would meet fishing dudes again. At no point in this story did I understand a single thing. Story 34. Just met an online friend of 6 years a few months ago for my wedding. We were close friends and still are, but not everything lived up to the expectation. It never dawned on me or any of my other friends that this visiting friend might have had something along the lines of Asperger's. That we should have picked up on it. My little brother is on the spectrum, so the signs were clear as day when I finally met him in person. This condition is in no way a detriment to our friendship. I'll love him all the same. It was just strange to have this image of a friend I thought I knew, only to realize they were someone different all along. It's not a bad difference, it just almost felt like I had lost a friend deep down. I was friends with someone that didn't exist. Somehow, over the phone or game chat, he doesn't have the same quirks he has in person. He's not aware of any of this himself. It's hard to explain. But like I said, we're still close friends and we talk at least once a week. Only now I have a better picture of who the real friend is behind the voice. Oh no, I getcha. I have a friend who talks in all caps online, but really is just very shy in person. Story 35. Got married. Our anniversary was just a few days, 17 years. We met via the long defunct Yahoo personals. It's something I reflect on often. I actually canceled what was supposed to be our first date due to needing to study. She hasn't mentioned it in a few years, so I might have finally lived that down. We hit it off on the first meeting. We were living together after a couple months. Took 6 months to plan a wedding we couldn't really afford. Looking back, I think about how close we came to not meeting at all. I said from the first time I heard it that she had a lovely voice, but that was all she was at the time. A soft voice in the night, easily drowned out by all of life's noise. I'm generally agnostic, but when I look back at all those times, a small part of me wonders. Story 36. Someone from overseas randomly messaged me asking me about how my city is. She was planning a 6-month working holiday and wanted to know how the city was. Normal type stuff like weather, where to go out, where to avoid, etc. What started as the odd email quickly became daily online chats. When she arrived in my city, I became her tour guide, and not long after, her boyfriend. We dated the whole time she was here. Even discussed me moving back with her, but we were two different people and broke up when she left. This happened about 10 years ago, and we're still in regular contact. Story 37. I got a pretty great track record with this one. I possibly have some pretty high stakes with it too. Seeing as I've been usually meeting up in foreign countries and sharing Airbnbs and stuff, I'm a mod of an anime sub. It's for one where the fandom is pretty cool overall and not super huge. I've met all these people via that subreddit. End up commenting on the sub to each other, recognize usernames, move it to Discord, and eventually just make plans to meet up. So far, I'm up to 7 people. with a few others that were more randomly bumped into them because of fandom stuff and didn't realize it or plan it. First time I planned a trip to Japan with 2 people. None of us had met in real life previously. Lots of please don't be a serial criminal jokes were had. In the end, it was 100% fine. Not cringy or awful. They were both super cool. Sometimes it's awkward for a bit since you've never met before and it can be harder to keep the conversation flowing, but everybody's been cool and they haven't been ended. Bonus, one of the people from that trip to Japan I also met up with in Japan again on a second trip. Just yesterday, I drove 5 hours and she flew from the other side of the country to hang out again. 10 out of 10 would travel buddy again. Story 38. I'm the commissioner of a fantasy baseball league with players from all over. We got people in Maine, Los Angeles, Chicago, the UK, Canada, and Australia. Well, our Australian league mate was coming to the US to do a tour of the few different MLB perks, and my good friend and I decided to meet him in Chicago to see a White Sox game. Tickets were bought, plans were made, and we ended up meeting him at Guaranteed Rate Field for the game. He pays for our tickets, having us each buy him a beer that night. Super cool guy and a great guy. I hope he can make it back to the States sometime again soon. Really, I'd love to meet up with a lot of the other people in our league as well. Story 39. I met a shy girl on OkCupid in February 2014. She was very different from most of my friends and all of my exes at the time, but surprisingly easy to talk to. We texted almost every day and talked on the phone once a week or so. She slowly became my best friend and I became hers. Over the next 2 years, we planned to meet up, but nothing materialized due to our schedules. Finally, in July 2016, she came to visit me over the July 4th weekend, and it was great. Our friendship translated incredibly well from phone to in person. She introduced me to the current generation of Pokemon. I fell off after Yellow, and I showed her that 3D games continued to be released even after Wii Sports. I was a little sad when she left, but knew I had this amazing friend living just 2 hours away. Not bad. Our friendship continued as it always had, and in December 2016, she called to say she was graduating from college and that a friend of hers had professed her love to her and she didn't know what to do. As always, I gave my advice, chatted for a bit, then hung up to get on with the day. But this time, something was different. We'd both been there through ill-fated relationships. This shouldn't have been any different, but for some reason it was. Was it a crush? I couldn't have a crush on my best friend, right? Turns out I did, and she had a thing for me. Fast forward to today, we've been dating for 2 years, have a house together, and just adopted the most adorable but stubborn little red husky. The internet is a beautiful place. Story 40. I actually met my boyfriend via the internet, and after having talked for a year, we met in real life. We went camping for a few days and drove around my home state, and I showed him around a bit. It actually happened earlier last year and was honestly the best thing I've ever done. We just celebrated our year anniversary of meeting, but this time with me currently living in his home state. It's definitely worked out for the better, and our relationship continues to grow and be better now that we're not doing long distance and get to see each other every day. Long distance can work, and online can work. You just have to be 100% sure and be willing to put in a lot of work. It hasn't been easy, but he's worth it. I know he feels the same about me. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.